You have spent years trying to fix something that was never broken, and the exhaustion you feel is the cost of working against your own nature every single day. The world handed you a template. It said, be available, be social, fill your calendar, show up, perform the enthusiasm, navigate the crowds. And if you cannot do those things with the ease that other people appear to manage them, if the large gatherings drain you while they energize everyone else, if the silence restores you while it makes others uncomfortable, if the one genuine conversation satisfies you in a way that 10 surface-level ones never do, then something is wrong with you. Something needs to be fixed. Something needs to be practiced into competence until you can finally function at the level the template requires. You believe that, to varying degrees, across varying periods of your life, you accepted the assessment that your preference for depth over volume, for silence over noise, for genuine aloneness over managed togetherness was evidence of a social deficit requiring correction. It was not. It is not. And every hour you have spent trying to be something other than what you are has been an hour not spent becoming more of what you actually are, which is the only direction in which anything genuinely meaningful about your life has ever developed. Loners are not people who failed at connection. They are people whose interior life is developed enough, rich enough, genuinely engaging enough that the world inside them competes favorably with most of what the world outside them offers. They are not antisocial. They are selective. Not broken extroverts. A different configuration of consciousness entirely. One that processes experience at depth rather than breadth. That requires genuine solitude to function at its actual level. That produces its best thinking and its most genuine presence, not in crowds, but in the specific, productive, entirely nourishing condition of their own company. 5 signs mark this configuration. 5 specific, recognizable, entirely honest indicators that the way you have always been, not the way you have been trying to be, but the way you have always naturally, authentically, consistently been, is not a personality flaw. It is exactly who you were built to be. The first sign you were born to be a loner is that silence is not uncomfortable for you. It is where you actually live. Most people cannot be alone with themselves without filling the space. The phone, the television, the background noise of content selected not because it is genuinely wanted, but because the alternative, genuine silence, genuine aloneness, genuine contact with the interior life, is more uncomfortable than whatever stimulation is available to prevent it. This is not a character observation. It is simply the reality of a large portion of the population who have never developed the interior life that makes genuine solitude feel like anything other than deprivation. You are not in that portion. For you, silence is not the absence of something. It is the presence of everything that the noise covers. It is the condition under which your most important thinking occurs, the kind that produces genuine insight, rather than the surface processing of whatever external input is currently available. The condition under which your most honest self-knowledge is accessible, because the interior voice that carries your most accurate assessment of your own life, your own values, your own genuine direction, cannot be heard above the noise that most people maintain to prevent having to hear it. Your relationship with silence is not a social limitation. It is the maintenance of the specific interior condition under which everything genuinely valuable about your mind and your life actually functions. When that condition is disrupted, when the noise of other people, other people's needs, other people's energy fills the space that your interior requires, you do not just feel inconvenienced. You feel genuinely displaced, like the most essential part of you has been crowded out of its own territory. Here is the first brutal truth. The people who cannot tolerate silence are not more socially healthy than you. They have simply never developed a relationship with their own interior that would make the silence feel inhabitable. Your ability to be genuinely, productively, completely at home in your own silence is not evidence of isolation. It is evidence of a developed interior life. And a developed interior life is the rarest and most valuable thing a human being can possess. The second sign is that your energy is acutely sensitive to the people around you. And time in the wrong company costs you something real that requires real time to recover. This is not a performance of sensitivity. It is not a social excuse. It is the specific, physiological, entirely documented reality of a nervous system that processes social information with unusual depth and breadth. The empath, the highly sensitive person, the introvert with a developed interior life, these are not people who are too fragile for ordinary social interaction. They are people whose system takes in more of the available information in any given social environment than the average person's does. More of the emotional undercurrents, more of the energetic registers, more of the gap between what people are presenting and what they are actually expect. Ryancing, that depth of processing is extraordinary when it is directed at something that genuinely warrants it. A real conversation, a genuine exchange, an interaction where depth is possible and reciprocated. It is exhausting when it is directed at an environment that provides no genuine return on the processing cost. Large crowds of people who are all performing their social selves, shallow interactions that generate noise without meaning. Relationships where the depth available is surface level and the genuine exchange the loner's system was built for is simply not available. The recovery time that follows these experiences is not weakness. It is the entirely proportionate response of a system that was genuinely taxed, not just socially inconvenienced by what occurred. And protecting that recovery time is not antisocial behavior. It is basic maintenance of the resource that makes everything else about you function. Here is the second brutal truth. You have been apologizing for a recovery need that is as real and as legitimate as physical recovery after physical exertion. The difference is that the world can see physical fatigue and accepts its legitimacy. Energetic and social fatigue, the specific depletion of the loner's system after sustained exposure to environments that cost more than they replenish, is invisible to most people and therefore consistently interpreted as preference, as weakness, or as the inconvenient quirk of someone who needs to toughen up. It is none of those things. It is the honest signal of a system built for depth, operating in an environment demanding breadth, and honoring that signal is not self-indulgence. It is the most basic form of self-knowledge available to you. The third sign you were born to be a loner is that you have developed genuine, specific, internally sourced self-knowledge, and you do not require other people's constant confirmation to maintain your sense of who you are. This is perhaps the most significant development that the loner's relationship with solitude produces, and the one that most distinguishes them from people who are not built the same way. Most people's self-concept is constructed almost entirely from external input. They know who they are, insofar as other people have reflected that back to them. Their strengths feel real when others acknowledge them. Their values feel solid when others share and confirm them. Their direction feels right when others validate the path. This external construction is not dishonest. It is the natural consequence of a social existence in which the self is developed primarily in relation to others. But it has a structural vulnerability that the loner's internally sourced self-knowledge does not share. When the external input changes, when the validation is withdrawn, when the people providing the confirmation leave, when the social environment shifts, the self-concept built on that input becomes unstable. The loner's self-knowledge was built differently in the sustained, uninterrupted, honest contact with their own interior that genuine solitude provides. In the hours spent not managing other people's perceptions of them, but genuinely examining their own perceptions of themselves. In the specific, private, entirely self-directed process of understanding what they actually value, what they actually want, what they can and cannot genuinely sustain, not because anyone else has reflected it back, but because they have looked honestly enough and long enough at their own interior to develop a relationship with it that is reliable. This self-knowledge makes you self-directed. You do not need continuous external motivation because the source of your motivation is internal. You do not need constant social input to feel oriented or real or rounded because your interior is sufficiently developed to provide that orientation independently of what is or is not being provided from outside. Here is the third brutal truth. Self-sufficiency of this kind is not cold. It is not the defensive independence of someone who has decided they do not need people. It is the freedom of someone who knows who they are well enough that their sense of self does not fluctuate with the social weather. That is not arrogance. That is one of the rarest and most genuinely valuable forms of interior stability available to a human being. The fourth sign is that you maintain clear personal boundaries not as a strategy, but as the instinctive protection of the interior space where your most essential work occurs. The loner's solitude is not empty time. It is the active, productive, entirely necessary condition under which their most important thinking, their deepest processing, their most honest self-examination occurs. The boundaries that protect that space are not walls built from fear. They are the architecture of a life that actually functions, that provides the conditions under which the most developed and most genuine version of you can actually exist and operate. When that space is intruded upon, casually without recognition of its importance, by people who treat your availability as the default and your need for solitude as the exception requiring justification, you do not just feel inconvenienced. You feel genuinely disrupted, like the environment that makes your most essential work possible has been compromised. Because it has. The boundaries you maintain are the protection of that environment, and the ease with which you maintain them, the absence of the guilt, and the over-explanation and the constant negotiation of your own needs that characterizes people who have not yet developed the self-knowledge to trust them, is itself a sign. It is the sign of someone who has developed enough genuine relationship with their own interior to understand what it requires, and who respects that understanding enough to act on it without requiring anyone else's agreement. Your boundaries are not barriers. They are the walls of the laboratory in which the most valuable work of your life occurs. Protect them accordingly. The fifth sign you were born to be a loner is that you are extraordinarily selective about where you direct your genuine attention. And that selectivity is not snobbery. It is the honest expression of someone who has experienced what real engagement actually feels like and has stopped accepting its substitutes. The loner has tasted genuine intellectual and emotional exchange. The conversation that leaves both people different from how they entered it. The connection that produces something in both people that neither had before it occurred. And once that experience is known, once the specific, unmistakable quality of genuine presence, meaning genuine presence, has been felt, the simulation of it registers as exactly what it is, a simulation, an exchange that produces noise without meaning, a social performance in which both people are managing impressions rather than making genuine contact. The loner's low tolerance for this simulation is not the intolerance of someone who finds other people unworthy. It is the entirely natural response of someone for whom the gap between genuine engagement and its simulation is not abstract, but immediately felt. They feel the difference in their body, in the specific quality of their own presence, in an interaction that is real versus one that is managed. In the specific aliveness that genuine exchange produces versus the specific flatness of time spent in social performance that produces nothing real for anyone involved. So they are selective. About where they invest their attention, about the people they engage with fully versus the people they move through interactions with courteously but without the full weight of their genuine presence. This selectivity looks to people who do not share it like aloofness, like difficulty, like the arrogant withholding of engagement from people who are simply trying to connect. What it actually is, the allocation of a genuinely limited and genuinely valuable resource, their deep, full, complete attention to interactions that are capable of receiving and returning it. Not because they are superior, because they are honest, because they have stopped pretending that all interactions deserve the same quality of presence, when the honest reality is that most interactions are not built to receive the depth of presence the loner is capable of providing. Now take all 5 signs together and read what they reveal collectively about who you are, not 5 separate quirks requiring accommodation. A coherent picture of a specific configuration of consciousness, one that is built for depth rather than breadth, for quality rather than volume, for the kind of genuine interior development and genuine external engagement that only becomes possible when solitude is genuinely honored rather than constantly apologized for. You are not missing the social gene. You are not broken. You are not someone who needs to try harder at being the kind of person the social template was designed for. You are someone whose nature requires different conditions than the template provides, and who has been systematically misled into believing that the mismatch between your nature and the template is your failure rather than simply a mismatch. The loner who accepts their nature, who builds their life around what their nature actually requires rather than around what they have been told it should require, does not produce a diminished life. They produce a life of extraordinary depth, extraordinary interior richness, and the specific rare form of genuine engagement with work and with the few people who truly matter to them that is only possible when the conditions are honest. That is not a consolation prize for failing at extroversion. That is the life your nature was always building toward, if you would stop working against it. So here is what this moment demands of you. Not the comfortable, warm recognition of 5 signs that describe you followed by a return to the same patterns of apology and performance and the exhausting daily work of pretending to be something you are not. The decision to stop. Stop performing availability you do not feel. Stop attending gatherings that cost you more than they give you and calling the attendance social health. Stop moderating your depth, your silence, your genuine preference for your own company in service of other people's comfort with who you are. Stop measuring your social success by standards that were built for people who are not built like you. And stop treating the energy required to perform the opposite of your nature as normal tiredness when it is the specific, preventable, entirely unnecessary exhaustion of someone working against themselves every day. Today you do one concrete thing. You look at your current week, the specific commitments, the specific social obligations, the specific places where your energy is going, and you identify the single largest place where you're performing rather than being, where you are expending genuine energy, sustaining a social presentation that is not honest to what you actually need, where the cost of showing up as the version of yourself that is expected exceeds what the showing up is actually worth. Name it, specifically, and make one decision about it, not the entire restructuring of your social life, but one honest movement in the direction of a life that actually fits your nature. One commitment declined without apology. One evening of genuine solitude protected without guilt. One relationship where you finally show up as the full depth of what you are, rather than the managed surface version that is easier for the other person to receive. The 5 signs are not a comfortable description of what makes you interestingly different. They are the accurate picture of a nature with specific requirements, and those requirements have been systematically unmet because you have been accepting the social world's diagnosis of your nature as the problem, rather than recognizing that the problem is the mismatch. Your solitude is not loneliness. Your selectivity is not arrogance. Your preference for depth is not unrealistic idealism. And your need for genuine silence and genuine aloneness to function at your actual level is not a social deficit. It is who you are. completely, honestly. Without apology, the world does not need another person performing extroversion they do not feel. It needs you, fully yourself, deeply present, functioning at the level your nature was built for. Stop apologizing for what you are. Start building the life that what you are actually requires. You have waited long enough, and so has the version of yourself that has been waiting for permission to simply exist. Give it, now.